All right. It looks like we are live. How is everyone today? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and on today's special live stream, we are joined once again by my good friend and colleague Karl Soule, and we're going to continue on the theme that I've been doing this whole week, which is working from home and different ways to kind of optimize your time and optimize working in the various Adobe CC applications. So today we're going to talk about something which is actually very cool, and it's part of the Adobe Premiere team plan as well as the enterprise plan, and it's something called Team Projects. So please welcome my guest, Karl Soule. How's it going, Karl?
Hi, Jason. I've been bombarded with questions all week about different solutions. So thank you so much for doing all these work from home sessions, because it's impacted the industry down here quite a bit, and we want to make sure people have some solutions. And Team Projects is obviously, this is kind of tailor made for people that need to collaborate as a series of editors working in different locations. It's actually that's part and parcel to how it's designed. And I've got a lot of the customers down here are actually working on this, particularly on the sweet spot for it seems to be people who are doing shorter form work, like if you're working on a sitcom.
Right.
Yeah. Team Projects is a fantastic workflow that enables people to be in different locations, leverage and use the cloud for sharing their projects. And I want to go through today and actually talk a little bit about some best practices on how to manage the media.
Right.
And we'll hopefully we can give a little bit of a demonstration here, because I know you're down in Phoenix and or Scottsdale, and I'm obviously in LA. I'm in Culver City.
Yeah.
And we can actually go through and share edits and actually see each other's work virtually instantaneously using Team Projects. So it's a really good tool.
So, and of course, we are broadcasting live today on Facebook, YouTube, Behance, and Twitter Periscope. So, as always, now I'm going to let Karl drive most of this. You will actually get to see us live collaborate too through Team Projects. So I'm signed into my team account, as is Karl. But this is the opportunity now to ask questions. If you want to know more about how this is working, if you're working in a team of 2, 3, or more, and you've got people all over the country or the world, like many of us do, and looking for sort of a better way to really collaborate outside of just sharing stuff in Dropbox, that's really what this is all about. So ask your questions. I'll be gathering them, feeding them to Karl as they come in. Again, don't be afraid to say hello, shout out, tell us where you're coming from. And I think, Karl, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
All right, sounds good. So just before I jump into the software and really showcase how Team Projects works, there's a little bit of prep that you want to do beforehand before you start creating and dealing with a team project. The thing to understand about a team project is the project file itself. Instead of having these local PROJ files, trying to manage which version is the current version, we take care of that for you. The project actually lives in the cloud, and it's got some built-in versioning control in it where as people are making changes, you can actually roll back through those changes and things like that. Now, one thing that Team Projects does not do is manage the media. And there's a simple reason for that. Everybody has different levels of security of how they want to handle moving the media around. Everybody has a different workflow in how they want to handle new media that's coming in. So depending on your workflow, that's one area that you want to kind of think about ahead of time, is where is this media going to live? A couple of common options that I see down here. We still have customers that are using what we love to call SneakerNet, which is putting stuff on a drive and taking that drive and having a courier or somebody deliver that drive to the various remote locations. I just walked through this with a major broadcaster in the New York market that is in the process of taking and distributing their editing to remote locations for a sitcom. And in that situation, they're actually putting the proxy files on a external drive, a series of external drives, and handing those out. Obviously, this also works with other cloud vendors. So if you're working already and everybody has Dropbox accounts, we're going to show you how you can set up your team project to automatically copy your media into a shared location on Dropbox. This also works with Google Drive. It works with OneDrive. And for today, what we're actually going to use is Creative Cloud Files. Now, for short form work, as you probably are aware, most of you have access to the Creative Cloud Files service. This is something for some of the enterprise customers. If you work for a big corporation, you might have to talk to your IT department because in some cases, for security purposes, that's actually been turned off. But for the most part, most people, anybody who has a Creative Cloud for Teams account does have access to Creative Cloud Files. And basically what this is it's a syncing service that allows me to share my assets. So really quick, I'm going to jump over to my computer here, and I'm actually going to open up a Finder window here, because what I've done is I've gone ahead and created a folder here called Team Project Promo. Jason, you can see this okay, right? Everything's coming through. All right, great.
Looks awesome.
So the Team Project Promo folder, if I right-click on this, I have the option of viewing this on the website. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And you'll see this opens up a web browser and takes me into Creative Cloud and allows me to see all the various folders that I have. In this case, here's my Team Project Promo. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back up one directory here, because I've got things organized into some different subfolders within this Team Project Promo. And I want to share everything that's within this particular folder here. So the very first thing I'm going to do is make sure that this is shared with Jason. So by clicking on the three little dots here, I can go to Share, and I can choose to invite whoever I want to be able to collaborate with this. So the idea is this location becomes the one source for all my media. If I'm working remotely, and you can see actually I've already added Jason. You can see Jason actually shows up in the list there. So we're already set to go. Any files that I put into that folder are going to automatically synchronize so that both Jason and I will have those. Now, one of the cool things about the way Team Projects works, if you're working with a syncing service, is the Team Project is actually always going through and it's looking at that location to see if those files are in there. So if you have a situation where you're jumping in, you're getting started editing, and there's been hundreds and hundreds of clips have been put in there, anything that's offline in your sequence will automatically go online over time. So it's not one of those things that when you first open the project, you get a big, hey, your media is offline, you've got to correct this before you can continue. You can actually jump in and start working, and the clips will automatically, a Team Project works differently in how it manages and how it looks for those links for the clips. So it'll automatically jump in and reconnect to that media as it becomes available. So once I do that and I actually send that invite, that's actually something that is going to show up inside of the Creative Cloud notifications. So within the Creative Cloud desktop app, I'll get a notification that that's been shared. Jason will get a notification. He can actually choose to accept that as well. And then his system will start to synchronize with those particular files. Now, once I've gone through and done this, I then need to create the team project. As Jason mentioned, this is one of those things that it does set apart the difference between the Creative Cloud individual membership and the Creative Cloud for Teams or Creative Cloud for Enterprise. You do have to have Teams or Enterprise in order to do this. But you should see options within the software that allow you to create a team project. So if I go to File, New, I can choose to make my team project. Let me center that here on the screen for you here. New team project. I can create a new team project from there. I can also, from the opening splash screen, if you have access to it, you should see new team project right on the front splash screen. Creating the new team project, if I want to create something, an empty project, and begin from scratch, this enables me to name the project, provide a description for the project, and again, I can add whatever collaborators that I want to add to this. And from a security standpoint, the best thing about this is there is no Premiere project file that lives someplace. Either the collaborator sees it or they don't even know it exists. So only the people that are invited have access to the team project. There is one other method of creating a team project, which is if you have an existing edit, if you've been working in a local Premiere Pro project and you're suddenly thinking, oh, wait, I've got to turn this over. I want to get somebody else to maybe do some temp sound work on this, or we've added some additional editors and we need to start collaborating more on this particular project. Premiere also has an option to convert a standard Premiere project into a team project. So by doing this, I would go to my edit menu, and hidden away in the edit menu is a little something called the team project menu. And inside here, you'll see I have an option to convert a project to a team project. Now, this also works the other direction. We'll kind of cover that later in the process. If you need to do archives, if you want to take something with you to go work on an airplane or something, you can convert the team project into a local Premiere project again if you need to. So just know that that option is there. Now, one last thing I want to point out in this team project menu while we're here is the fact that this is also, this is a big shift from the way that a team project differs from a regular Premiere Pro project. If you've ever had media go offline in a Premiere project, or if for some reason you wanted to relink to a different set of assets, maybe you want to have timecode burned in, so you made copies with the timecode effect in Media Encoder, and you wanted to link to those for review and approval, or something like that. You know that there's this whole process in the bins where you go through and you right-click on clips and you say make offline, and then you relink the media. Team projects don't work that way. Team projects use a centralized media management screen that shows you at a glance what media is online and what media is offline. And in most cases, all you have to do if something is offline in your project, you go to this screen, you create a new, for anything that's offline, you select the folder and point it at where that folder exists in your local environment. The cool thing about this is the team project remembers these links on a user-by-user basis, so that once you sync up, once you link up everything, you move everything from the offline state to the online state, it's going to remember that moving forward. And as you push and share changes between different team members, you're never going to lose those, media is never going to go offline again just because, the guy on the other side of town has a different path for his media than you have for your media. So might have to show a little of this, but yeah, the media management screen is just something to be aware of, because that's probably one of the biggest differences from a day-to-day workflow to be aware of. Now, I've already created and opened up a team project here. It looks like Premiere. It acts like Premiere for the most part. Most of the way you expect Premiere to operate, your keyboard shortcuts, everything else is identical. It's exactly the same that you would expect to work here. The biggest difference is that multiple people can have a team project open at the same time. If I zoom in here to this little icon here, you'll see that there's a little thing showing that there's myself, the owner of this project, and I have one more collaborator, and that would be Jason. So Jason is acting as the additional collaborator inside this project. I can see whether Jason is currently online or offline just by looking at the icons here. So I can tell at a glance who else is currently actively working inside of this team project. Now, some best practices when you're working inside of a team project. Once you start the editorial process, you start ingesting some clips, you start creating sequences, the most important thing to kind of work out is every editor should have their own sequence that they are editing. So in other words, if you're working on something larger that has maybe Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, do some communication on who is going to be cutting and working on which act. Or if you're each coming up with alternate cuts, create different sequences so that every editor has their own sequence that they can edit from. Now, the great thing about this is you can share all the media. So you can have all the media imported one time. It's all going to live in the team project. and everybody pulls from that same source media. But you do want to have different edits so that you're not accidentally overwriting each other's work. If we have time, I might show you what happens. I can show you exactly what happens if two people do overwrite each other's work. It's not the end of the world. We actually have some conflict resolution that's built into team projects that helps to make that not that big of a deal.
And that's actually super cool too. In fact, we should try that when you get to it. And I was going to say, I just opened the project too. So if you wanted to go back and show the status has changed.
Yeah. So if I zoom in here, you can see now Jason is online. I'm online. So I can see as soon as his icon goes active, I know that he's actively working inside of the team project. And I've actually created a series of edits here so that we can each make our own changes. So in this case, I've got Jason's cutting in this sequence here. I'm doing an alternate cut in this sequence here. I've created another one just so we can show you what happens when things go horribly wrong and people stop communicating with each other. Again, it's not that bad of a situation, but it's something, generally speaking, you naturally kind of avoid it because different people work on different parts of the project. Basically, anytime any changes happen within this project, they're immediately synchronized to the cloud. And in fact, down in, let's see if I can zoom in on this because this is a little hard to see sometimes. Right. Let's see. I can't go down far enough. Let's see. Let me try that one more time. Nope, it's not. Oh, wait. Maybe. Nope, it's not going to let me do it. Okay. You're going to have to trust me. Way down in the lower corner, it's down in the lower left corner of the screen, there are some little arrows. And these arrows show whether the project is synchronizing to the cloud or not. If you're getting a little green checkbox, it means everything is synchronized. And this is just always happening in the background. There's no save function inside of a team project because everything, your latest copy of the edit, every few, maybe within 20, 30 seconds, everything that you're doing is constantly being synchronized to the cloud. If you see a little icon that shows two arrows, that means that syncing is in process. You don't have to stop. You don't have to worry about it. It's just something to know that, it is actively using your internet connection to synchronize what you're doing. As you're editing, as you're making changes to the team project, you're kind of working in a protected space. You're working in this area that only I can see those changes. If I were to open up Jason's timeline right now as an example, I'm not going to see Jason moving clips around on the timeline. We experimented with stuff like that, and we just found it was too much like a video game. It works better to kind of know that there's no eyeballs looking at what you're working on right now. So we use a metaphor where you push a button and you say, okay, I want to share these changes with the rest of the group. So if I go into my sequence, and I start making some edits or some changes to this. Let's say I want to trim maybe a little bit of time off the header on this opening graphic here. As soon as I make that change, this starts to synchronize to the cloud. As soon as it's done syncing to the cloud, you'll notice down in the lower right corner of the project panel, there are a couple of additional buttons here. These buttons
we can't quite see them. You might want to maybe move your screen. Can you go arrow down any lower or zoom in a little more so you can get to the bottom there?
Let's see.
Just the actual UI where we're missing it. Hold on. You know what? I can probably do it if I get rid of your lower third. Give me a second. Hold on.
Okay. Yeah, it's not.
It's hard to see here. Yeah, you can't quite get to the bottom there.
Can't quite get to it. Let me try one more time here.
Yeah, I mean, we can see it in that view right there where you are. That's fine. You can see that. Yeah.
So there are these little tiny buttons here. The same functionality is also found in the edit menu. Under the team project panel, you'll notice there are two choices for get latest changes and share my changes. And sharing changes means I'm taking what I've been working on and I'm pushing it out so all the collaborators will be able to see the latest thing that I'm working on. So if I started with a blank timeline, I started building that out. anybody who looked at my timeline before I shared changes would still just see a blank timeline. They wouldn't see any of the things that I had added up until that point. Right now, if somebody else in the team project were to look at my sequence, they would just see the original endpoint for this graphic that I just trimmed. So in order to push out my changes so everybody sees them, I click Share My Changes. It shows me what's been changed. If any clips have been added, they'll show up in this list here. Any sequences have been changed, they show up in the list here. And I can just say, did a change to the title sequence. All right. And I'll go ahead and hit share. Oh, looks like Jason, you're making some changes as well.
Oh,
I'm just
yes.
going to go ahead and get those changes.
Sneakily did that, yeah.
So I'm going to quickly get some changes here from Jason so that I'm actually making sure that I'm looking at the absolute latest and greatest. Now, that's actually happening because I have Jason's timeline open. And now I'll go ahead and push my changes over. It kept my note and everything here. So now I can just quickly resolve that. And now both of us are completely up to speed. Now, Jason, you want to share your screen and just show what I just did that very quickly. I got my changes and then I pushed,
yes.
Or I got your changes and I pushed my changes back to you.
Yep. So they should be seeing, I've got our 2 up display on right now, and in the timeline, you can see I've got this little yellow down arrow that's showing show asset status, and it says Karl Soule has shared some changes for this asset.
So on the timelines themselves, we give you little clues with little pencil icons and little arrow icons to indicate that somebody in the group is actively working on that particular sequence. So it is possible to have all the sequences open simultaneously if you need to monitor what somebody else is using. If you're going to be like copying their work and pasting it into your timeline, that's perfectly fine. You can also load sequences into the source monitor and use somebody else's work as a source to cut into what you're working on. The one thing that you want to avoid is both editing a sequence at the same time. Now, you'd never be able to do this in standalone Premiere, right? Only one person opens a project at any given time. Team Projects lets you do it, but you don't have to worry. As long as you maintain some decent practices, nobody's going to lose any work. Worst case scenario, you'll end up with 2 copies of the sequence in your project, and you can kind of pick and choose which direction you want to go from there. So just as an example of this, I'm going to open up my sequence here called Let's Make a Conflict.
Love that.
Now, Jason, go ahead and start making some wholesale changes. I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete that graphic, and I'm going to move this clip.
Okay. And as you're starting, I'm going to get the changes that you already submitted so people can see here it's doing just that. And that was to the promo timeline. All right, so it's doing its thing. Just refresh those. And now I'm going to go into the conflict one and, start making some changes too.
All right, so I'm moving a bunch of stuff around. I'm kind of adding some overlap on some of these clips where I can. Making some J cuts or L cuts, just to really, really showcase that there are some changes that are being made. Now, for right now, I am seeing a pencil icon indicating that I am currently working in this. I've made some changes. I've edited this. Jason, go ahead and push your changes up to. Go ahead and share your changes of what you're working on here.
Yep. All right. It's happening right now. Waiting for it to synchronize. And I'll say...
So again, this is showing like the absolute worst case scenario. 2 people editing the same timeline at the same time, just to show that you don't lose any work. Everything continues to be stored in the cloud. I'm even going to show you how you can go back and pull an earlier copy in just a moment here.
Right, and I just hit share, by the way.
Okay. So... really quick, in a moment, I'm going to get your changes, but I'm editing away here. Now, already I'm seeing that there are some changes, and I already see that, oh, hold on a second. I'm getting the dreaded red arrow. So the red arrow indicates that I've edited this and Jason's edited this. Uh-oh, what's going to happen? Well, the first thing that I should do is get Jason's changes so that I can kind of see where these changes have occurred. I'm going to go ahead and choose Get Changes. And this is going to give me, when it detects that there is a conflict, it's going to give me 3 options. Basically, it's going to say, hey, wait a minute. There is a conflict. This timeline, 2 people edited this timeline at the same time. What do you want me to do? The safest and the option that most people choose is the bottom option here, which is called copy and rename your version, then take the shared version. In other words, Jason was first out of the gate. He shared his changes first. We're going to keep his copy, keep that as the current name. Everything that I've done, we're going to make a copy of the sequence that I can go in, and then we can compare the 2 side by side. Now, in situations where one editor takes precedence over another, if I'm an assistant editor and I'm in one of the acts or one of the reels, and I start going through and tweaking something just because there's a little thing that's kind of annoying me, and I go to share changes and realize, oh wait, there's a conflict, and the lead editor has been editing away on this particular portion of the team project. Okay, well, ignore my changes. I can go back and add those in at a later date. We need to see what the latest version is. So that's what the other 2 options are there for. It's really, in most cases, if everybody kind of has equal status among all the editors in a collaborative environment, take the 3rd option. Make a copy. There's 2 sequences. You can visually compare the 2 and then make a choice which way to go forward.
Hey, Karl, so there's a question coming in, and I think the answer is yes, but I'm not exactly sure, but I assume so. Frank was asking, do elements created within Premiere, so not media, but things like captions, automatically carry over to other users? So if I had added some captions to that timeline and shared that, I assume that gets carried over as well.
Yeah, anything that's a synthetic element that lives inside your bins in your team project. So, if somebody creates, black video, transparent video, if you create a captions track, all of that should carry across. There shouldn't be any issues there. If there are some extra workflows, you want to make sure where you're saving things like motion graphic templates when you're setting up your project. You want to make sure that is something that is set up properly so that those motion graphic templates are also shared with the group. So that's something in the, it's called scratch disks. So within the team project, you just want to make sure that the scratch disks are set up correctly if you're using things like Mogerts. Nice. But otherwise, yeah, you should be able to set things up accordingly. Now, this is still resolving the conflicts. It's going through, and I guess because I made a bunch of changes, it's taking a little bit longer here. I'm just going to let that sit there and finish up what it's doing. It'll finish, don't worry. One other thing that I wanted to talk about, though, is it's important to make sure to set up your project in such a way that if new media gets added to the team project, that media goes to everybody within the group. So it's just about finished. There it goes. It's resolved all the conflicts. Nice. I'll go ahead and click OK. And so now I am back inside my team project. And if I want to share my changes, I can. You'll notice that there's now 2 copies of the Let's Make a Conflict timeline. And so I'll zoom in so you can see that better. So there's 2 copies of this. Let's show a conflict. Let's show a conflict copy so that we can now kind of pick and choose. And if you've never done this before, the way you can do sort of a side-by-side comparison, I can take the copy of my timeline and I can actually load that in the source monitor. And using a function here, I can actually gang the source and program monitors together. And Premiere even has an option here where I can show both sequences at the same time. So I'm just going to move this so that we're doing something we like to call pancake editing. So here I've got my copy of the timeline is loaded in the source monitor. Jason's copy is down here in the program monitor. And as I move the playheads, you can see that we are actively seeing the changes. And I can see that there's some trims that were changed here. I can see that just the order of these clips has been modified slightly. Jason comes in a little bit sooner on his version of the timeline, whereas mine cuts to the boats sooner. So you can see, you can actually visually see how these are different from timeline to timeline. Now, getting back to the media side of things, I wanted to touch on this.
Yeah, and actually, Karl, before you
Yeah.
go there, because someone's actually asking a question about that. This is somewhat related. Gilbert Tang is asking. He has a NAS, a QNAP NAS. I'm not as familiar with that, and he'd love to know best settings on the NAS side for like optimal Premiere collaboration functionality.
Oh, goodness.
Kind of a
Yeah.
more extended question there, I guess. Yeah.
A little bit. I do know that we've had a lot of different films over the years have been cut using QNAP technology. So it is a it's one of our many partner companies that does shared storage, and so it does work. In fact, I have to be 100% certain of this. Don't kill me if I've gotten this data wrong, but if memory serves, the documentary "Biggest Little Farm" was actually cut on a QNAP. So yeah, it's definitely you can use shared storage with a team project as well. I want to stress that as well. We're talking about working from home here today, so I haven't talked too much about this, but in a situation where Jason was down the hall from me. Hey, Rumi, we could be using shared storage and use something like a NAS to be able to cut. Biggest thing is just making sure that you have the bandwidth for everybody. This is one of those cases that your mileage may vary depending on if you're editing ProRes LT versus ARRI RAW. The data rates can be so radically different that it's difficult to talk specifics in a webinar, or in a screen share. But yeah, we can definitely hit me up offline. We can definitely talk more about just like in general some of those settings, because that is something I tend to deal with. Now
You're going to talk about storage, yeah.
Yeah. That said, one thing I wanted to kind of touch on dealing with team projects is I want to make sure that if Jason adds some clips to the team project, that they're automatically copied and they'll sync using the same location that all of our other footage is stored in. So I'm using Creative Cloud files to do the synchronization. This works exactly the same as Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, any of the other synchronized drive systems out there. So one thing that I'm going to do in the team project settings, when you first create a team project, you get these same screens that these should look fairly familiar to anybody who's worked inside of Premiere Pro before. So certain things that I'd want to change, if I'm using motion graphic template media, I would want to make sure that this is also in that same pathing. So in this case, I could browse where my motion graphic template media for this team project is going to be, and I would just make sure that it's in this same team project promo folder here, so that any motion graphic templates that I add are going to be shared with Jason, or vice versa. I do the same thing with Creative Cloud library files. I would want to make sure that these are also set to that same location. Again, important so that anytime any new media is created, it's going to go to that location. And then the rest of these, the only other one I might worry about, if I'm using a lot of video and audio previews, I'd obviously want to set these to the team shared location as well, so that those can be shared. And captured audio comes into play if I'm doing any type of voiceover in the timeline. Jason's done a number of videos talking about being able to do like temp voiceover in the timeline using the little microphone icon and getting the 3, 2, 1 countdown if you're doing things like promos. And if you're doing anything like that, you'd want to make sure that that is also set to that team project's file location, so that again, if I record something, it will go into that directory, it'll get synced to Jason, and Jason will be able to find it on his end. Now, as new media is coming in, Premiere also has what we call ingest settings. So the idea for this is where if I have this enabled, I can set this. Let me go ahead and zoom my screen a little bit here so you can read that a little better.
Yeah, perfect.
I've got this set up so that anything that gets imported, if I use a file import command, if I use a just drag and drop from a Finder window into the team project, Premiere is going to kick off a background process, and it's going to make a copy of that media, and it's going to put it into that team project folder. So this ensures that if I go into my local library of sound effects and I decide to add like 10 or 15 sound effects to the team project, that I don't have to do any additional work for Jason to have these files. If he very quickly goes in and looks at my copy of my project after I've shared changes, if the files haven't synced yet, they may be offline. But one by one, as they sync, bip, 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 they'll automatically connect. And the reason for that, once again, is this is what I get the most questions on. In the team project, all of the media linking is actually managed in one location here. There's a screen, a special screen for team projects under the team project menu called Media Management. Now, if anything is, the way this works, everything is online right now. I've kept my pathing relatively simple. All of the footage it's saying is online right now. If anything was missing, it would be under this offline category. And, oh, excuse me, I'm coughing a little bit. What I would have to do to link this up is to select the folder in question that's offline and choose this button down here at the bottom marked New Media Mapping. Now, when I do this, this is not going to blow out anybody else's linking. It's not going to turn the media offline for anybody else, but it's going to add an additional path to look at for my login. So this is one of the ways that team projects can even work with Windows and Mac clients, because obviously pathing in general is going to be different. You know, on a Windows machine, you've got like, you know, things are going to be in the D drive or the C drive. And Macs don't have that type of pathing. They typically work with volume names. So you can have different media management. So if you add somebody new to a team project and for whatever reason they have copied their media into a different location, they may see that the media is offline. Don't try and do like individual linking media files or use like a media offline screen. Use media management and just point at that top directory, and the team project should be pretty intelligent to go through and find everything that it's missing. So, any other questions out there, Jason?
I think we're pretty caught up. A lot of people are it's funny, there was a question about would proxies be sort of a more ideal way of maybe sharing the project or starting the project, with the ability to, of course, to the main editor or somebody could relink to full res media later.
Yeah. In fact, this was actually one of the things that I was working with a client this week on. What they're actually doing, they've been editing the original high-res media in their offices on, you know, sophisticated shared storage within their facility. And now that they've gotten the order to shelter in place at home, the editors want to continue to work. So what they have actually done is created proxies for all the footage, and that is done the old-fashioned way. It's done inside the project bin. You right-click on your master clips and you choose proxy, create proxies. So they've gone through and created proxies for all the media. They did a smart thing though. Put all the proxies in a single folder location if you can, because that'll make it very, very easy to relink. Proxies work just fine. They work just the same way as it works with standard Premiere. The biggest thing is when it comes to linking those proxies, you can leave the high-res footage offline, and in that media management screen, just go in and find, you know, you'll see that the proxies folder is offline. Okay, select where that is, and if you've been given a drive with the proxies, link to that folder on the drive, and boom, everything will come online, and you'll be editing with the proxies. And that still leaves the option when somebody gets back to the office and has access to the high-res, they can they'll be able to toggle the proxies off using the proxy toggle switch, and they'll have the high-res edit back at headquarters.
Right. So, and I guess I would imagine, I mean, of course, most of this is dependent on just, you know, your overall, well, whether it's a shared storage, a LAN or a NAS or whatever, the speed of that, plus, you know, your connectivity in your environment. I mean, all of this. So do you see speed boost or any kind of real-time boost if you're editing with proxies versus trying to work with native media? I mean, it still has to access it from the cloud anyway, but if it's smaller and lighter, theoretically faster, easier?
Right. Well, the biggest thing, since we're talking about this synchronization of files, if you have a 2 gig ProRes file versus, a 200 meg, you know, H.264 file, obviously that second file is going to sync much faster to your local machine, and you're going to get better performance with that. As far as synchronizing the team project itself, all that's really passing back and forth to the cloud within the team project is the metadata.
Right.
So
there's really no significant difference in that case, because once the media is downloaded, you're effectively working off of it locally anyway.
Right. One of the big things about proxies that comes in handy just has to do with security. That is one of the biggest challenges. A lot of the customers that I actually work with, believe it or not, have no internet connectivity on their machines whatsoever. We actually
daring that is.
Yeah, we call it sandbag systems, completely offline, no connectivity whatsoever, and it's viewed as a security concern sometimes. So if I am couriering, is that a word, couriering? If I'm sending a drive to a remote editor, the idea of watermarking their copy with maybe name information on that, so that we can track, if there, heaven forbid, there are any leaks. Honestly, I find, everything in Creative Cloud files, everything the way Creative Cloud works as far as security is concerned, we pass, there's all kinds of audits. This is all rated for enterprise clients. So we've gone through and done all the heavy lifting on that front. So, honestly, and this is my personal opinion, where I typically see leaks, it is usually when you're not using a cloud solution. It's when somebody leaves their laptop open in a coffee shop, or accidentally loses a drive that wasn't encrypted. So those, I wouldn't worry too much if you're using something like Creative Cloud Files. That's actually, a pretty secure solution.
We got another question, Karl,
Sure.
coming from Glenn Mayberg, around folder structure for your projects. Now, he's asking if you use like a standard folder structure. I imagine this is probably standard is a little different for everybody, but I imagine what he's actually talking about, which is kind of like productions, which we announced a while ago. Just, is there a particular way that you organize the team project? Or, I mean, I guess the bottom line is you can work in Premiere with a team project as you always have. And if your team knows how you organize, they'll know how to navigate.
In fact, let me see if I can dig up we actually did publish at the IBC 2019 show back in September. We published some examples of what I would call like template projects.
Right.
And these are just projects that are organized with folders and subfolders, and sequence presets that we typically see for broadcast and film customers. Everything that's in that blog entry, if I can go back and find it, you can download the samples that were posted there, and use them in a team project. There's no reason why that folder structure wouldn't be a great way to organize a project. Admittedly, I tend to be a little bit fast and loose with some of my organization and some of my projects, but
aren't we all? Yes.
and that is the reason that I'm doing demos and I'm not actively working on a TV show.
Right.
But being organized on films and television, it is crucial to be able to find what you're looking for, and naming of folders, and there are some common structures that we see there, and that's why we came out with those templates. And I'll see if I can dig that up for you.
Right. So, hey, another question from my buddy Ron Sussman here in the desert. So, this is something that I get asked a lot. I figured maybe you could maybe you kind of alluded to this earlier, but the team project itself exists in the cloud, right? This is not something that is saved locally.
There is sort of a cached version of the database locally. And the reason I bring that up, I'm going to go over to my media browser tab to just quickly talk about this. In the media browser tab, you can actually see, just like as if it were a drive, you can you see that on the screen there where it says team projects versions? So I can actually see the server in the media browser, and inside of this are all of my team projects, including the one that I'm currently working on here. And by selecting any of these, I can actually come in Let me see if I can move this over a little bit here. I can actually come in and I can see what versions have been pushed to the cloud. So this particular project, we have shared changes back and forth between each other 11 times. And I can tell by going to the versions tab here and up at the top, I can see that this is what's showing here. Now, you'll also notice there's a tab here called autosaves. Autosaves are much more granular. In fact, there's probably dozens and dozens of these that have come up. You can see it saved just a couple of moments ago. If you're ever in a situation where like you accidentally deleted something, if you need to go back and get an earlier version of something, the media browser actually has you covered, because you can actually use this. When I say versions, I'm currently looking at version 11. That's the current version that I have open. But if I needed to go back to version 10, I can use the little slider along the side here to actually look at a different version of this. And if I roll my mouse over the little dot here, you can see that there is a comment in the little pop-up, little tooltip that pops up there. You know, did a change to the title sequence. If I roll it back another step, Jason says, here's some changes. So this is where those little comments can actually extend. There's a G in there. I don't know. My typing is on camera is not that great. There's extend edit of 1422. So at any point, if I need to see kind of an earlier version, like a magical time machine, this lets me go back in time and see those changes. And even on just a local level, working remotely, if for some reason, I needed to go back and look at the, something that hasn't been shared yet. The autosaves window here actually lets me just go back, and by going to that tab, I can get even more granular with changes that have been happening. As they've been synced to the cloud, those autosaves automatically populate in here, and I never have to worry about it or do a save as command or have to have an autosave message popping up on screen. So that's another nice thing. So in this situation, we've created a copy of these two sequences here. If I have decided that, you know what, Jason's edit is way better than mine, that's going to be the new form that we move forward with, I can actually come in here and just delete this copy and push and share those changes with Jason so that there's no confusion about this. We'll know that that is the version that we're going to move forward with. If I did ever, for some reason, 2 weeks, 2 months down the road, I want to go back and say, well, wait, maybe we want to look at what I did, in that one. Remember when I branched it that one time? I can go back and find that in the media browser by using that production history slider. I could go back and get it. So it's kind of a different way of thinking. I tend to be a pack rat as an editor. I tend to, if I see, weird stuff on the camera, ooh, it's a light leak, let's throw that in a folder someplace. You can be pretty clean as you move forward with your projects, and just know that the server is going to maintain all this history. Every time changes are saved, that gets stored on the server in the cloud, and it's something you can roll back to. You can view into it, and you can pull like an older copy of an edit forward to your current copy. So
super cool.
All right. One last thing that I wanted to quickly show is the fact that Media Encoder as well can actually be used in a team project. So if you have somebody like an assistant that you want to actually have them responsible for organizing and rendering out the deliverables, they can actually use Media Encoder to be able to do this. Media Encoder, just like the media browser, can see the team projects folder. Let me just bring this over onto my screen here. I can twirl down the team projects versions here. Let me zoom into that. I can open up the current team project that Jason and I are working on. I can go into sequences. Here's Jason's copy of this. And I can very easily, just like I could with a regular Premiere project, I could take this and drag it and drop it over and add it to my queue, and get ready to start to to work with this. Figure out what formats that I need to render this to as deliverables. So, again, if you're working collaboratively, you might have an assistant that is just focused on getting the renders as people are finishing the various deliverables. You could distribute that to a different person. Now, one last big thing that I want to point out here, this is just one of those gotchas. The way team projects works, everybody using it has to have a unique Adobe ID.
Oh yeah, this seems essential.
Like common. Yeah, it seems like common sense, but I have had some cases where people, for testing purposes, they may have the same Adobe ID that's on a desktop and a laptop, and they think, well, I'm just going to use both of those. We'll do some testing, and they wonder why it doesn't work. Everybody has to have their own Adobe ID because that's how we track the changes. And the server gets a little confused when Karl Soule is sharing changes over here at the same time Karl Soule is sharing changes over there. It won't work. So keep that in mind if you're going to test this workflow out. Most people, if you're working in a collaborative group, everybody's got their own unique Adobe IDs anyway. But I just wanted to call that out because that is something occasionally I do get a phone call from. It's usually something that happens very early in the process when you've got a couple of engineers that are just kind of trying to test this out. Just make sure that everybody who's signing in, every workstation that's going to be accessing the team project should be signed into a unique Adobe ID.
That's awesome. All right. Well, we've got just a couple minutes, Karl, and I've been answering a lot of the questions here in the various chats. We've had a ridiculous amount of engagement. So this was perfectly timed. A lot of people are saying, I mean, again, this is partly why we're doing these work from home streams because, most people are feeling this now. And any additional things? I know we had talked about, we didn't get to show After Effects today, but briefly mentioned it before. Did want to point out that After Effects and Prelude has a role in this too, right? There is some tie-in with Prelude as well?
Yeah, so the applications that that have an option in the menus to open up a team project are After Effects, Premiere, Prelude, and Adobe Media Encoder. You're not going to be able to open a team project in Photoshop, at least not today.
Right, not yet.
But the idea is this one project file can be opened in all of these different applications. So from an After Effects user, if you needed to get an After Effects user on board to maybe composite one particular scene or something like that, when you invite them to the team project, when they open up After Effects, they can choose File, Open Team Project, and they'll see the team project there. And again, as long as the media has been synced locally, they have some way of accessing the media, they'll be able to go in and create compositions within the same team project. They don't have to create a separate After Effects project. They actually create comps that live inside the team project.
Right.
Now,
and follow it wherever it goes, right? That's the idea.
Exactly. So when they share changes, those comps live inside the same team project. The editors will see those comps populate in their team project, and they can drag and drop them to their timelines, just like a dynamic link. It is, in fact, a dynamically linked composition that can live inside of their sequences. The one thing that I would stress is if you're doing a lot of After Effects work, this is really designed, again, overall with a team project, we're usually talking about, people who are doing like under 30-minute type of work with a single team project. You may want to break this up into multiple team projects. You can have multiple team projects open simultaneously if you need to work on larger chunks. But there are some database restrictions and limitations that prevent this from having like a single team project that has 100,000 files inside of it, like you would typically see on a lot of feature films or documentaries. So try and keep your team project somewhere around 50 to 20,000 assets within the bins is kind of a safe number to assume. And you'll be fine. Yeah. So for longer form stuff, break it up into multiple team projects, or and particularly with After Effects users, when you start adding After Effects comps to the team project, those kind of count almost, I'd say, tenfold. They're a bit heavy.
Yeah.
Is the shortest way of putting it. So In some cases, it might be better to have a separate team project for the After Effects user. But just know that the editors could open that team project as well, and they could drag and drop the comps directly over into their sequences if they wanted. So it's kind of cool that way.
Nice. All right, last question before we sign off. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for watching on all the various networks today, on Behance, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, Periscope. A couple of people have now asked this question. I kind of answered it in some of the chats, but I wanted to get your take on it too. So what about versions of, let's just go with Premiere. I guess it would be across the board, but what if, like, one, I guess the question is, do you need to all be on the same version of Premiere? And two, what if I'm on 14.03 or 14.x, but you're on 14 or 13? Are there any particular, I mean, obviously, you theoretically would obviously want to be on the same version, but if you're not, what kind of problems does that potentially introduce?
Well, typically it's going to, whoever makes the team project, the team project is, if you're used to dealing with Premiere Pro and you're used to sharing projects within Premiere Pro, it's not too much different when it comes to team projects.
Right.
Generally, if you make a team project from a newer version of Premiere, and you try to share that with people who are running an older version of Premiere, it will tell you saying,
right,
oh, well, this was created using version 14. You're on an older version. Update in order to work with this. I would like to stress that we've done a really good job now where you can actually have multiple copies of Premiere on your system simultaneously. Right. If you need to have Premiere version 13 for the majority of your work, but you want to have Premiere 14 for a team project that you guys are all working on, that's perfectly fine. They don't conflict with each other. So just keep that in mind. But it is one of those things that, it's best if everybody has the same version, because otherwise, like if I use a feature in 14, like I've used the effect for auto reframe on a bunch of stuff, and you're in version 13 that doesn't have that auto reframe effect, what do we do? Right. It's dependent on the local version of Premiere. So that's why you want to try and maintain some sanity there.
Right. And that's actually a really good point, is that the ability to have simultaneous versions installed is something that's done through the Creative Cloud desktop, and it's an option. It'll ask you, do you want to overwrite the existing or keep them separate? And that's probably one of those checkboxes. I don't know what, I think our state is to update automatically. I think that's the default state of that. I can't remember. We've changed it a few times.
We have changed it, and I think
is it now that it keeps it separate?
I think for the video apps, I think it does keep the old versions.
It keeps the old version by default. So
by default,
yeah. So when you go to install, and just to here, I'll just switch over real quickly here and see if I can just show this. Hold on, bear with me as we're ending. See all the chats coming up as well. I'm just going to do our side-by-side with both of our screens here. All right. Yeah, so like here, I've got 14.04 installed, which it looks like today there's another update, actually. But if you go to other versions, here's where you have the option now to install. You can go all the way back now to 13.15. When I do this, I have to, authenticate with my user password on the machine. It'll ask if I want to install next to or, over top of, or whatever the actual language is. So that's really helpful. And again, this is something which you can run them very successfully side by side. There was a time when you didn't want to do that, or I should say installed side by side. There's a time when you didn't necessarily want to do that. Now that's, especially as you said, for the video apps, we get it. A lot of times you might need to go back to an older version for a particular reason, or just to have it for older projects for simplicity and to keep things, the way you want them. But you may also need to have the current version for other newer features, newer ads, whatever it is. So that's great to point that out. Yeah. Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, I think looking here, I don't see any more questions. So that is all the time we have for today. So as always, thank you so much for joining me and Karl. You'll be able to watch the replay of this here on the Premiere Pro Facebook page, there on Jason Levine Video YouTube, on Twitter, Periscope, and Behance. I will be back tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, with my audio and video masterclass on Adobe Live. So it's going to be some audio live recording, I believe. Do you have another thought there,
Oh,
Karl, before we go?
just one last thing. We are actually we just, if you can share my screen really
Yes,
quickly here
you
before we
got it.
go. I
Yep, there
wanted
we
to
go.
point this out because Jeff Pedersen on our team has been
Oh,
working
yes, yes.
diligently with everything that's been going on. There is actually an Adobe blog. Theblog.adobe.com is the if you're not familiar with it. But we just recently put together a list of resources that not only cover team projects, but also cover all the other ways that you can collaborate remotely using Creative Cloud, including talking about some partner technologies. So if you're interested in certain things like Bebop, if you need to know more about some of the different partners, there's like 300 different partner technologies that are richly, deeply integrated inside of Adobe Premiere. So we've got some of that information posted here as well. And tomorrow, I want to say it's at 11 Pacific time. I'm going to be jumping in and actually doing a companion screen share, kind of diving deeper into what's posted inside this blog,
Right.
just to get some more information. You can register for this. We're really kind of gearing this one for those broadcasting and film customers. So just to be aware of that, it is something we're going to be talking about, some technologies that are part of like enterprise solutions out there. So just keep that in mind, whether it's appropriate for you or not.
Awesome. All right. So until then, you got a lot of programming, and that's a good reminder too. Don't forget that if you're looking for inspiration, working from home and need to take a break and break away from things, you've got my daily live streams, you have the master classes, you've got Karl's stream tomorrow. You of course also have all the Adobe Live content running on behance.net/live. So if you're looking for resources or to get inspired or to learn something new or to try out a challenge in Photoshop, Illustrator, XD, we do have you covered, as much as I don't like using cheesy old expressions, but it is pretty true. So, all right, everyone, thank you again for joining us, and have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and we will see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.